Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2005 direct-to-video animated sequel, Kronk's New Groove. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to John for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Kronk's New Groove is one of those animated sequels that doesn't really feel like a real sequel. It just feels like two episodes of a animated spin-off that are crammed together into one somewhat cohesive whole. And I think that's because that was initially the intent. I think this was intended to be like either the pilot episode of the series, or it was going to be one of those things where it was going to be a couple episodes, but Disney decided, hey, we are doing a lot of these direct-to-video sequels right now. We could use another one. How about we take that Emperor's New Groove animated spin-off project and turn it into a direct-to-video sequel? And ultimately, it did get a animated series, which was called, I believe it was called The Emperor's New School. I think that's what it was called. And it was more of a prequel, though. And I think this wasn't a prequel. This was something that happened after the events of the first film. So this is one of those things where, at least I think it is. I could be wrong. But no, I don't think so. No, actually, no. It's definitely not a prequel, because it's one of those things where Kronk, he's turned a new leaf and he is doing the right thing, and it's a sequel and a spin-off. It's not really a prequel like the show. And it does focus more on Kronk than it does on any of the other characters from the first movie. So it's not misleading in that regard. Kronk is the main focus here. And Kuzco and Pacha and Chica and any of the other characters, including Yzma, they're all characters that are kind of secondary to Kronk. It's directed by Elliot M. Bour and Saul Andrew Blinkoff. And this is one of those films that you can tell it's a lower budgeted affair. And you can tell that there's not as much here when it comes to the narrative or the story. Things just barely connect together with a very flimsy wraparound, which is essentially Kronk has some issues with his father. His father is somebody that he's failed to impress his entire life. Poppy. And his father is making a surprise visit. And Kronk wants to impress his father. And what his father wanted to see from his son is that his son had a nice home and a family and wealth and influence and power and all of that. The typical sort of stuff. But Kronk is working as a chef in a restaurant, and he doesn't have the big house on the hill. He doesn't have the family yet. And he's terrified of his father because his father always disapproved of him and never really appreciated his interest in the culinary arts and, that typical sort of stuff. So the two stories are tied around this idea of Kronk trying to impress his dad. And the direction is fine for this kind of project. It really does look like just two episodes of an animated show that are put together. and it definitely doesn't have a very cinematic look to it in terms of the fluidity of the animation or other aspects of the direction, but it's fine. It's decent enough. It's not anything worth praising effusively, but it's also not anything worth um, that much disdain. The script by Tom Rogers, like I said, it's a very flimsy story that's just connecting two separate stories together about this whole thing about how Kronk wants to impress his dad and he just wants a thumbs up from Poppy. And it does a good job making you sympathize with Kronk and wanting him to find a way to make his dad proud of him. But none of these stories are really that compelling or that interesting. They're full of a fair amount of cliches. Then I would say like the first story, which is it involves him buying an old folks home because he was helping these elderly people and he took advantage of them and bought their home on a discount, and then he turned it into his mansion, his home on the hill, so he could impress his father. But in order to get the money for to buy this home, he had to work with Yzma again, who is like half cat, like she has a tail, and he's working with her to sell this placebo potion that's supposed to make these older people younger, but it's just snake oil. And ultimately, he feels bad. He put them out of a home. He got them addicted to this fake potion. And so he makes things right. He turns the home that he bought back into a retirement home. He tells the old people, his friends, the truth that this potion is nothing. It doesn't make you younger. And puts a stop to Yzma's plans. And it's one of those things where it's all right, I guess, but there's a lot of like moments with the elderly people that are kind of cringe because they're like one of them's like skateboarding and they do the whole sort of stuff where they think they're young, so they're acting like teenagers for some reason. And there's just a lot of bits of humor in this particular part of the film that I just didn't really care for. And I just didn't really care that much about the retirement home story and buying and getting a house on the hill. None of that really meant that much to me. The second flashback, so to speak, because these are all flashbacks, because in the beginning of the movie, Kronk screws up and messes up fondue night at the cafe, and now he's reminiscing about what could have been, and how he could have impressed his father, and now he's talking about this one time when he almost had uh, a woman. He almost had a girlfriend or a potential wife and a family, and it's this Girl Scout troop leader that he meets in competition because he is a Boy Scout troop leader, and he's won all these championships for years in a row, and he actually finds some real competition with this woman, and he falls for her, and they even get involved in like a disco dance together, like something out of Saturday Night Fever, which is just kind of weird for a film from 2005. But yeah, he finds this girl, falls for her. Her name is Miss Birdwell, and the whole relationship that buds between the two of them, I would say it's probably the most compelling and strongest aspect of this film, because I think the writers did a good job making it really seem like these two are meant for each other. They are honestly a cute couple. but they do the typical uh, tropes and cliches when it comes to these kind of stories where, oh, there's some betrayal where one of Kronk's boys, because of what he told him earlier to do whatever it takes to win, he cheated, and Birdwell finds out, and so now she never wants to see him again, and so they break up, and that leads to the finale of the film, where through the help of his friends, the elderly people, which they dress up as his kids, which is really disturbing and honestly probably one of the scariest bits of animation I've seen in a while. But yeah, they dress up as his kids. But it's all for naught because he already had this plan enacted where he had Pacha's wife and her kids act as if they are his family. So and he also decided to take ownership temporarily of Pacha's home just to keep this ruse going. But of course, by the end of it all, because of the boy who cheated earlier finding a way to tell the truth and get hold of Miss Birdwell, she comes back. She reunites with Kronk, and despite everything falling apart and Kronk's lies coming to the surface right in front of his father still gives him the thumbs up, and everyone lives happily ever after. It's a very forgettable film. In fact, there's like a line of dialogue in this film that actually mentions how forgettable something is. And I was like, that's rich because this film is really quite a forgettable movie. I think it was like something along the I don't remember the exact line of dialogue, but it was something like your name, there's something, you know, like some letter in your name stands for some kind of thing about how dull or forgettable something is. And there it is. That me and mediocre. That's it. Kronk, he's like, Chaka, there's no I in team. And this Miss Birdwell's like, there is a U in euphoric. And then Kronk's like, and a me in mediocre, which is the perfect way to describe this film. It's mediocre. Uh, I mean, if you're watching with your kids, like, there's worse things you can put on the television. But like I said, there's really not much to this. There's not much to say about it because there's not much there. It's just a typical like direct-to-video animated sequel that is loosely connected to the first movie and just feels like it's a series of episodes of a TV show. The voiceover work is still really solid though, because you have a lot of pretty much everybody comes back, which I thought was pretty cool. Like, how often does that happen for a direct-to-video animated sequel? A lot of the time, you don't get a lot of the original cast. You get a lot of people who just flat out refuse to come back because they aren't getting paid enough or they don't want to do it. But here, Patrick Warburton is still Kronk, and he's still a lot of fun. And I think it was a good idea to focus on a different character in this sequel instead of just doing another adventure with Pacha and Kuzco. In fact, I think Kronk is a more likable protagonist, despite how mediocre this film is compared to Kuzco. And I know I mentioned mediocre because that really is honestly probably what it really is. But since I like the first film more than this, I would have to say this is like barely below average. Like, it's ultimately mediocre, but when it comes to my critical lens, so to speak, I would have to say this is a pretty like below average kind of film, because mediocre for me is like a so-so thing that I could watch as a time waster, like the first film. I don't have any desire to ever watch this again. So I can't really say that this is like a truly mediocre movie. It's very below average. But the voiceover work is is pretty good. It's pretty solid. I would say that's definitely where the film shines, other than some of the moments with the script. Yeah, Patrick Warburton does a wonderful job yet again as Kronk with the deadpan, and it's just really fun to see him play this character again. Tracey Ullman's a nice addition to the uh, craziness of the cartoon with her voiceover work as Miss Birdwell. I thought she worked really well with Patrick Warburton and the scenes that the two had together. Eartha Kitt, once again, chewing up the scenery and being a blast as Yzma. David Spade is in this as Kuzco, but it's a very small, short cameo. John Goodman's also in it again as Pacha, and so is Wendie Malick as Chica. John Mahoney, he's in this. He voices Kronk's dad. You might recognize him as Frasier's dad from the show Frasier. And then really that's your main cast. And yeah, it's a good voice cast, and it's nice to see pretty much all of the original voice over actors and actresses back for the sequel. Now, it also features some editing by Philip Malamuth and Arthur D. Noda, which is all right. It's not anything particularly notable for editing and animation, but it's there. The music by Mark Waters and Jeannie, I think it was Janine. Yeah, Mark Waters and Janine Tesori. I'm not a fan of the music in this. Very generic, similar to the music in The Emperor's New Groove. There's nothing really that memorable in terms of the musical numbers or the lyrics or the instrumental work or uh, anything involving how the score or the songs are put together. Um, and it does help that it's only 72 minutes, but because everything is just very loosely connected and it just feels like it's just two separate stories that are just loosely connected to one another, it really does have some issues in terms of its pacing because you don't really get invested that fully into the story because of how fragmented things feel. And by the end of it all, like everything just predictably ends exactly how you think it's going to end. So that doesn't help either. There's not really much in terms of surprises when it comes to the script, because it plays everything very safe. Um, and it's ultimately one of those lazy day kind of projects where you can tell that a lot of the people involved with this, other than the voiceover actors, their hearts weren't fully into this because it's like, it's just a direct to video sequel. It's not getting a theatrical release. We're just doing this for a paycheck just so we can keep working for Disney. It is what it is. Another day, another dollar, that kind of thing. And it really does kind of have that vibe where it's like, yeah, it's another Emperor's New Groove thing, but like, you know, I'd rather be doing something else. But the opportunity is here for me to work, so I'm gonna take it. That kind of thing. And like I said, I can have some fun with this, mainly due to Patrick Warburton as Kronk, but not enough fun with everything to the point where it's what I would consider to be like an underrated or undervalued sequel or something I would highly recommend. I would say if you're a diehard fan of Kronk, the character, and if you're a diehard fan of Emperor's New Groove, then yeah, it's worth a watch at least once just to see what happened to Yzma, after the first movie, just to see Kronk get to live happily ever after, which was nice to see, I have to admit, despite how cliched and how below average and terribly generic everything was leading up to that point. But it was still nice to see a character like Kronk still get a fairy tale ending, so to speak. But anyway, I don't really have much else to say about this except thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.